Notwithstanding these challenges that are present, the digital economy also presents these opportunities for revenue administrations to feature innovations in system and design for revenue collection. Additionally, an opportunity is presented for tax policy to leapfrog current discussions and move towards regimes that collect revenue through the use of technology. And some of these examples are real-time VAT systems, cross-border digital trade, and so on. And so, one of the big things that a few revenue, including here in Kenya, a few revenue authorities have succeeded to do is to use digitization, automation, information technology-based systems to automate the basics and some complex forms of tax administration. That has increased your ability to collect revenue from your existing base. It has allowed you to expand your tax base because you can now collect through third parties, through basic data matching. And it has also reduced the level of corruption and rent seeking within the tax system because nobody needs to deal with a taxpayer personally in the basics of tax administration. So all of this has been good. And that is on the basis of just how digitization and digitalization impacts us in terms of the intangible taxes on the one hand and the possibility for enhanced tax administration. But what I want to do now is just to focus a little bit on global discussions on tax and the digital economy. So while we ask the question about how do we tax intangibles, how do we tax companies that are trading or doing business in your country, but they don't have a physical presence here, there are discussions going on through the OECD's inclusive framework, and this is a platform, as many of you will know, where countries around the world under the leadership of the OECD programs get together in this inclusive framework. I think it's got about 134 countries that are members, 24 of which are African countries. And they get together through technical committees and meetings to look at how to tax the digital economy. So there are 24 African countries there. What I want to share with you is our view in ATAF is that this is not just about how to tackle digital transactions. When you go to these meetings, as we do, you discover that actually what's happening there in Paris is people are busy negotiating reallocation of global taxing rights. Who's going to get what share? And the days of who owns the extractive, who owns the business, these things were bricks and mortar, it was tangible. So what is residence, what is source, what is a permanent established, those days are different now. And so now it's about who owns the intellectual property, who owns the marketing rights, who owns, and then on the other hand, the question is, but who creates the value? Is it the consumer that creates the value or the perception of that value? And so the arguments are different. And within these meetings, there are groups of experts that go off and do research. And out of this will come a proposal that by July 2020, they must present to the OECD heads of state. A few things why I'm mentioning all of that. One, it will be the OECD heads of state that's going to then decide on the world allocation of taxing. I don't know what you think about that. Two, that Africa, although we are 24 countries there, we hardly say anything when we get there. That at the political level, we are not there. Because when that decision is made, it's not going to come to the African Union. It's going to come to the G20, which is the G20 developed country. Not causing any political aspersions on anybody. I'm talking about a process. And so in the reallocation of taxing rights, which determines in the end what as a continent we were able to collect in this new world that is emerging or that is already here, we do not have a sufficient political presence. There isn't a global platform where these things are discussed. The OECD offers the only platform, and that is why we are there, together with everybody else. And so we have a huge responsibility as Africans to do the work that we need to do to look at what are the implications of the digital economy. ADAB has published 3 technical notes, and we're the only organization outside of the 4 countries that have issued their own technical opinion on the digital economy that has made such a deposition. Nobody else in the world has done this. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that as Africans in this world of IFFs and in this world of taxation, we need to do this together. We need to bring awareness to our policymakers, to our treasuries, to our ministries of finance and heads of state. We need to make awareness to business, because African business is also standing to be affected by this. Because the more the digitalization is not regulated, or the impact thereof, the more domestic businesses are going to pay a price. Because domestic businesses are not able to compete with international multinational businesses. Because if they don't have a physical presence and they don't get taxed appropriately, how's the Kenyan or the Ugandan or the Liberian business is going to compete with it? Because they pay a 30% corporate tax, and their competitor either pay no tax or a 5% effective rate, so they don't have to charge the same price for a bottle of water. And so those are the implications I think we need to look at. So these global discussions are important. And therefore, it is kind of a bit concerning that the work on illicit financial flows has kind of slowed down. We started with a great report. We quoted the numbers all over the place. There were even people in England and other places who doubted the numbers. And we were there in the middle of the battle. But over the last year or two, hardly anything has been happening. And I think we must note with concern. But as organizations, we don't have to wait, we must do something about it. And so organizations like the Economic Commission for Africa needs to probably rethink its investment in this. Because certainly over the last year or so, we have not seen the leadership we saw before. Meanwhile, we must act on the losses. We must know how to deal with the losses and how to deal with that digital taxation. There's another element to this. And it doesn't have to do only with Google and Facebook and so on. It has to do with the behavior of African subsidiaries of multinational organizations. What we are finding is that through a multiplicity of international tax systems and rules, these multinationals are able to get away with paying very little or no tax in our country. And that's the point I made earlier. One of the effects thereof is that it crowds out local business. And so, if you look at how multinational companies in Africa, the African subsidiaries, are stripping out profits, and they strip this out through the deductions of excessive technical fees, excessive interest rate deductions, loans that the mother company gives to the African subsidiary, often loans that no commercial bank would give to that subsidiary, because they're over here, and then charge them additional interest. All those technicalities, in the end, your tax base basically funds that mother company. And so these multinationals do not behave like that in their own countries. They behave like that in Africa because they can. They behave like this in Africa because we also do not sufficiently defend our tax base. And one of the things that deals with this is the lack of tax treaties and the content of those tax treaties. A lot of it has to do with the fact that our treaties that we have on the continent with developed countries often, in most cases, makes us sign away our taxing rights, because the tax treaty essentially is an agreement of how to share the tax. But when that agreement is signed, you will find that the African country gets a very poor part of that tax. And so these are stuff that is within our control. We can re-look at what we are paying for technical services, what we are paying, how do we deal with interest deductions, how do we renegotiate treaties. Senegal this week cancelled one of their treaties, saying this thing doesn't benefit us. I know TJ and A here had court cases about treaties in this country. It is important that we focus on this, because digitization is one issue, a global economy is the bigger context, and the competition and the behavior of international business vis-a-vis local business and who pays what share in the end affects illicit financial flows and what the company can take. So these are all the issues I think governments and business and organizations like ourselves here need to bring together, but we need to bring it together, Alvin, beyond the conference. We need to bring it together beyond the pamphlet. We must research. We must be tangible. We must be empirical. We must bring the numbers. We must look at the cost of the contract, of the incentive. We must look at what is the cost of the treaty in terms of actual outflows. Then those policy makers will start waking up. It is not enough to stand outside. It's important to stand outside, but it's not enough. And that information must come from us. And so I'm hoping that this conference, being a Pan-African conference, will focus on the African ability. I want to conclude and say to you that I've read this week the AU report on domestic resource mobilization and illicit financial flows. And I looked at all of the organizations here today. That report doesn't mention any of you, any of us. I'm saying this with a lot of respect to the AU. It's an AU report. It doesn't mention any of us. It doesn't mention any of the work that any of us do. ATAF has, over the last 3 years, worked with our member countries, and in 3 of these countries, we've assessed $1.1 billion in taxes that was never going to be collected. It's not written there. What is there is Tax Inspectors Without Borders of the OECD. What is there is IMF research. ATAF has brought out for the past few years the best tax research publication in Africa. The African Tax Outlook. There's not a single reference to that. And so, I'm not blaming the AU, I'm also blaming ourselves. What are we doing? What are we doing to have confidence and courage in our own successes and our own achievements? And how do we expect our work to influence the policymakers if people do not know about them? So I'm hoping that this gathering will strengthen that we will not just be a gathering of complaints, that we will not just be a gathering of saying what the world is doing to us, but this will be a gathering of action where we look at what is the type of empirical research we're going to do, what is the kind of technical work we're going to do, what is the kind of policy initiatives that we're going to be proposing and how we're going to be getting there, so that there's a plan, and that the plan can be ours, and that if as Africans we're going to go to Paris and talk about the digital economy, we talk about it understanding and knowing the numbers. When you buy from Wish, when you buy from Amazon, and the impact of all of that. So ladies and gentlemen and colleagues, my appeal and my wish for us at this conference is that we leverage yes, that we celebrate our togetherness as Africans, because we do that. That is what we do. And that we do more than that, because the one thing we tend to do if we come together as Africans is we spend a good of our first time blaming other people. So I suggest, let's take that as a given. We don't have to do that, and we use the time to plan and make our plans in order to influence and have impact so that we can stem illicit financial flows and build a tax system on the continent that can deal with the new economy as young people would if they were given a chance to lead the continent. Thank you.